All right, welcome back. I hope you've had a chance to look at the case of Wilkerson v. State and try to figure it out. What the lawyers basically did is the defense lawyers, they invoked a very established doctrine called the void for vagueness doctrine, or the vagueness doctrine. It says, look, when a criminal law, this applies to criminal law, and Florida animal cruelty law makes it a crime, a misdemeanor in the first degree for animal cruelty, and in fact a felony in the third degree for aggravated animal cruelty. The vagueness doctrine says, look, if a law is not clear, if the law is not specific, if the law is just too vague, then it is not constitutional. And I've got to tell you, this is actually a very important principle of rule of law that really goes beyond even the criminal law to apply to all types of law. And it's a doctrine that whether we're talking about international laws, we'll see later, federal law, or state law, even local, municipal law, it's a very important doctrine. The basic idea of a rule of law, and in fact, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Lon Fuller, who was a very distinguished professor at Harvard Law School decades ago. But he wrote a book called The Morality of Law, The Inner Morality of Law. And in the book, he says, look, for a legal rule to be valid, it's got to comply with a number of minimal requirements. And let me go over some of those, the ones that I think are the most important ones. One, the law has to be publicly promulgated. It cannot be a secret law. You don't know what the law is. The law has to be prospective, applied to future conduct, not what you did in the past. The law has to be sufficiently general. You just can't pass a law to single out a specific person. And also the law has to be at a minimum clear and intelligible. A person of reasonable intelligence needs to be able to understand the law. Why are these elements so essential to rule of law? Because think about it, right? Fairness. You have to know what the law is if I'm going to be punished for breaking the law, or if there are going to be potential adverse consequences to me, a fine, imprisonment, other penalties, if I don't live up to the standards of the law. So Wilkerson, it turns out, is a very important case. Now, how did the lawyers make this argument with a straight face? Well, they looked at the definition of animal in the statute. And I have to say, in the Florida statute, and I have to say they make a very interesting point. Do you know how the Florida statute defines animal? It's a very broad definition. It's every living dumb creature, quote unquote. That's not my definition. That is the definition in the Florida statute chosen by the legislature, or the majority who was present that day to vote for the law. The idea there, of course, is to distinguish non-human animals from human beings. Wilkerson says, well, look, this law doesn't really specify, does it include wildlife? Is it just pets? What about marine life? What type of animals? And so they were trying to argue that the definition of animal was too vague, too broad. The Supreme Court, common sense, look, any ordinary person of reasonable intelligence can understand that animal or living, every living dumb creature, animal, the word animal, pretty much applies to everything, right, that's non-human, that can walk around, live and breathe, that kind of thing. And so they upheld the conviction, and the Florida Supreme Court upheld the statute. But nonetheless, you can see that this is a larger principle at stake, that laws have to be clear, they have to be prospective, they have to be general, and they have to be intelligible and understandable. And they have to be in public. All of these principles are very important. All right, with that, we conclude our introduction to state law. In the next set of videos, I want to talk about federal law.